Joining me now is KT McFarland, former Trump administration Deputy National Security Advisor and American Conservative Union board member. She's also the author of Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. KT, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. What do you think about that? He was obviously gracious, Zelensky was. He realizes how desperate his situation is, how much he needs that lifeline with the U.S., but he says it's a pity we didn't talk before the invasion began.
Yeah, there are a couple of things here. I mean, I think Ukraine, tragically, sadly, despite the extraordinary heroism of its leaders and its people, Ukraine was lost a year ago. And that's because the United States, as you just pointed out, shut down the American oil and natural gas industry, shut down American exports to Europe, liquefied natural gas. So as a result of that, what happened? Price of energy went up. Putin got really rich because his main product is selling oil and natural gas abroad. And Putin also got an enormous amount of leverage, especially over Europe, because he supplies 50% of the European energy sources, especially to Germany. So Putin comes into this rich with a lot of leverage. And the United States knew that something was going to happen within the year. What we should have done, and sadly President Biden turned it off, was to give lethal weapons to the Ukrainians before the war began. Trump had turned on those lethal weapons to export to Ukraine, but when President Biden came in, he sort of cut back on them. So as a result, you know, Ukraine is in a very desperate situation, and I think it only gets worse. At the end of the day, Putin is going to get what he wants. It's going to be bloody. It's going to be nasty. But he's going to get what he wants.
Well, I hope you're wrong on that. And by the way, you wrote a letter to the president that was co-authored by Steve Moore, Steve Forbes, and Newt Gingrich, saying just what you laid out, that we should have taken action a year ago, or we shouldn't have taken the action to undo our energy independence that we gained under President Trump. But, you know, now you even have a Democrat senator, Senator Joe Manchin, who, of course, is a renegade in his party. He's not far left. He's centrist. There are only a couple of them, but there are a couple, and he's one, coming out and saying specifically that for the sake of our national security here, we need to ramp up domestic production. Let me just play a soundbite of what he said earlier today. Roll tape.
Energy has been weaponized. We have the ability to basically counter that weapon. We really do. The United States has the ability to backfill and help all of our allies around the world. I think we can show solidarity here, but also we can make a difference.
So what we are not going to be getting in the future from Russia, if indeed the private oil companies continue not to buy from Russia, we can backfill from ramping up U.S. domestic production. Is there any chance that your letter and what Democrat Joe Manchin is saying will get through to this administration?
Well, it may not be getting through to this administration, but it's getting through to the Germans. Germany has stood in the way of a lot of aid to Ukraine, wouldn't give Ukraine any lethal weapons. It stood in the way of stopping the Russian supplies of energy and oil and natural gas to Germany. It was more afraid for its own economy than it was for Ukrainian security. But something really amazing happened on Sunday night. The German government, led by the Green Party, the most far out there anti-fossil fuel part of the German political environment, they led the charge to say Germany is now reversing course. We do not want to be dependent upon Russian leverage and Russian blackmail and Russian oil and natural gas. So we, Germany, are going to look at alternative sources. We're going to revisit coal. We're going to revisit nuclear power. And we're going to revisit where we get our energy. The second thing they did was say, and they're also going to increase defense spending and their NATO contribution. And then finally, they started giving lethal weapons to Ukraine.
Right.
So President Biden, he had a terrific opportunity at the State of the Union, Dave, to reverse course, but he didn't.
He's leading from behind.
Tragically.
And we're hoping that maybe the influence of some of our allies will have an effect on this administration. But you continue to have Jen Psaki denying that there's any relationship between the tough anti-fossil fuel regulations of this administration and the slowdown in energy production, which is insane. I mean, there's no other reason why we saw the prices of oil jack up because of the shortages here at home. And while we are clamping down on U.S. oil production, killing American jobs, killing the American consumers, we are giving a green light to Iran. of all places in the world, who are fast-paced in developing a nuclear weapon. What do you think of that? The news that we may come out with a new Iran deal, giving them tremendous leverage to produce more oil than ever, and while we haven't lightened up at all on U.S. production.
You know, a year ago when President Biden started shutting down the American energy industry, not only did it make Putin rich because that was his main energy export and the prices went up, as you just pointed out, but Iran got really rich. And now Iran is in a position not only to have the resources to develop their nuclear program, but now the political leverage to do it. You know, these things happened a year ago. A year ago, I think that set in motion the events we now see in Ukraine today, and I think it also set in motion the events that will now be playing out with Iran. Iran will now get nuclear weapons thanks to the fact that they're rich and they have all the political leverage, just like Putin has.
Now, is it conceivable? We just had Ambassador Volker, Kurt Volker, talk about the possibility of a small no-fly zone might be in keeping with what could be done according to international rules so that we wouldn't get into a World War III situation. Is that at all possible?
I doubt it. You know, Vladimir Putin is backed into a corner. This is not going the way he expected. He thought he'd be in within 3 days, control Kiev, have a puppet government in place, and that's not happened. So the thought that Vladimir Putin is somehow going to, you know, give up a little bit of the airspace to make it a no-fly zone, I don't think it happens. You know, the only thing that's happened that's all good news is that the Russians did agree to allow corridors for people who want to leave Ukraine, you know, the women and the children who want to leave Ukraine, and also humanitarian goods inside. But, you know, for us to get into a fight with Russia and creating a no-fly zone, I mean, that is a war with Russia.
I want to end on Zelensky because, of course, he has become an international figure, and that will last for generations, I suspect. And I don't think it's going too far to call him a Churchillian figure here, but the press conference that he had today was very risky. And I mean, you know, he'd already been warned that perhaps the Russians could find some way of triangulating electronically his location based on cell phones alone, let alone a press conference where there are a bunch of cell phones. Do you think that Putin's at all worried about him becoming a martyr if they kill him? And maybe that's why he's holding back on a direct attack on the possibilities of where he might be hanging out.
No, I think just the opposite. In fact, I would assume that Russian hit squads are actually trying to take out not only Zelensky, but the other national leadership. You know, Zelensky, not only has he mobilized his own people to stand up and fight for themselves, really alone, he's also shown NATO how to get things done. And I think that the big example, the big takeaway from what Zelensky has done with Ukraine is that the NATO nations, who were drifting apart for the last decade, last 15 years, they're now solidified, led by Germany, not the United States, but led by Germany to reinvigorate the NATO alliance, to stand up to Putin's next move, which was and is to go after NATO.
But you definitely need a stronger United States, KT, don't you? I mean, this really depends on a strong United States with backbone that will say, we just had Larry Kudlow talking about the Trump administration, what Trump would have done in terms of Putin's desires. And I mean, you see no backbone. As we mentioned before, we are leading from behind, which is no way to deal with Putin.
Right. Totally agreed. You know, President Trump, he pointed out at the CPAC speech, he was the one president that Vladimir Putin didn't go to war over, didn't dare do a military incursion under the Trump administration. Part of that was the energy issue, but also part of it was, I don't think Putin wanted to get into a tangle with Trump.
Right, right. KT McFarland, good to see you, KT. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.